All right, today marks a couple of things happening. One, I've got a new First Focus t-shirt, very happy about that. And the second is that we're starting a limited series of episodes focused around employee experience, which is EX, or customer experience, and as you would expect, that is CX. We're going to look at how you can shift those metrics in the right direction, and specifically how you can do that using tech. So today, we're going to be looking at how the devices you provide your team with, or potentially the choice of devices you provide your team with, can help drive those metrics in the right direction. And if you are going to go with a hybrid environment, how you can do that securely and cost effectively. Right, so to help me get through all of that, I've got Ed Parangodan, Mac Specialist at Synnex. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
Hello, good start, strong start, good. Very welcome. So let's start off with just your Mac background, right? It's good to just get a sense of how you know what you know and where you've come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I'm Ed Parangodan. I'm the Mac Specialist at Synnex. I've been involved with the Apple channel for the last 17 years. So I spent a bit of time at Apple. That's where I started my career. Helping organizations, small to medium organizations, deploy Mac in their environment. Then spent a bit of time with a vendor, American vendor in the cloud space, Jamf, that help organizations also deploy, manage, and secure their Mac environments as well. Spent a bit of time throughout the channel in reseller, BDM, enterprise lead space. And now my role at Synnex is supporting partners in supporting their customers with deploying, managing, and supporting their Apple environments. So,
cool. All right. Well, I think that Jamf experience is going to come back and be in handy later in the episode. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess, there's no point sort of teasing this out too much. As much as I had, I guess, previously a while back, thought of it as a sort of, Mac versus PC kind of a binary decision. There's obviously an awareness, and I think, at Synnex and you yourself have spoken about that it's not one or the other now. It's very much the two. How have you seen that hybrid sort of approach creep in, and what are you seeing happen as a result of that approach being adopted?
Yeah, look, all sorts. I think, I kind of think back to 10 plus years ago when you used to see those ads on TV. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, and you've got that whole Mac versus PC perception out there, right? And you've also got, I guess, a lot of typical Apple creative pockets that use Apple devices in some way, shape, or form. And Apple's really got some strong, I guess, pedigree in the education space. I think what I have seen over time is Macs creep into commercial enterprise organizations of all shapes and sizes for a number of reasons. I think you think about Apple's sort of Mac sort of pedigree in the education space. A lot of people are entering the workforce.
Like my kids coming out with like the iPads from school, they're not going to go in and go, give me a PC. They won't know what the hell that is.
Yeah, they want to use a tool that they're more comfortable with. They use it at home, they use it at school. On the other side, we're starting to see a lot of executives kind of drive those decisions within organizations. They've got a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone that they use at home, and they go to IT the next day and they say, hey guys, make this work, right?
Yeah.
So then you typically find IT departments suddenly scrambling to keep the executives happy as well. I think that has then led to this concept of employee choice, which I'm sure we'll elaborate on throughout the session today as well. And I also think COVID and lockdown had a massive part to do with the growth there as well, in that a lot of people would just mind devices that they could get their hands on. But also from a support perspective, people were just choosing Mac as choice.
So when I'm thinking about why this matters, so why would a hybrid device strategy, a hybrid IT environment drive, first off, let's look at employee experience, right? So you've got someone coming into a company and they've got, not all roles in a company are the same. You've got maybe a creative role versus, someone in the exec, for example. So the thing here is we're looking to drive the productivity. Can they get more done in the same time, or potentially all of their job done in less time and have, more free time? Can they be more productive in that they can assist others in the business? And I guess that just removes any potential stress. What else is there? There's the sense of comfort that they don't feel like they're being set up to fail, because it is, as you said, they're coming out of an environment with potentially Mac or PC. They're able to continue with that. It's not a choice forced on them. It reduces the training overhead, I would assume, as well, if they're given that choice. Am I missing anything there in terms of how a hybrid environment would drive employee experience?
I think you hit the nail on the head there, right?
Cool.
So brilliant, you've done your homework.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to me. No, look, and I think when we talk around, productivity and how choice impacts productivity, amongst other things as well, people at the end of the day just want to use a device that they're more comfortable with, they're productive with. And you're right, it reduces some of those overheads around training and additional management and support costs as well. And I think there are some cool organizations, both locally and abroad, of all shapes and sizes that are seeing or reaping the benefits of that as well. I think Jamf's done a bit of a study around when given the choice, 7 out of 10 people will choose a Mac when they're starting a new organization or at the time of refresh as well.
Jamf would say that though. But
that is a good point. That is a good point. But then I think we're seeing that across other organizations.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying
they're absolutely not wrong. But there is a little bit of bias there. But then you look at a company like Accenture and all these big consulting firms where when they're actually seeking end user feedback as well. There's some stats around when interviewing certain industries. I think there's something like 82% of people see tech playing such a massive role in the work that they do, the organizations that they're looking to be a part of as well. I think there's another stat as I kind of pull up my notes, trying to keep this as casual as possible. 42%, or there's a stat like 42% will consider leaving an organization due to substandard tech out there as well. So
and even if it's not substandard is huge, right? If it's just not up to not up to spec, absolutely. Like if you're trying to, and I actually had this in a previous role where we had a guy who was looking after our content for us, and the computer he was running would just if he was trying to render a video, he literally couldn't do anything else, right? Like that was his day done pretty much. And so that's definitely not fit for purpose. But it's also just do you know how to do it? There's nothing more terrifying than having to go and ask a colleague, how do I do this really basic thing on an environment I'm not comfortable with, right? So it can be both, either underspec, not fit for purpose, or just not familiar.
100%. And I think, there's so many other factors there as well, right? So, but tech plays such a crucial role to the work that we all do. So I think it's part of this identity of some people as well. So
yeah, that's true. Why is that a thing? Why are people so, I guess it's just that brand loyalty, that sense that, I don't know, it's been with them for such a long time, as you say, if they've come through that school environment and they keep going, there is this genuine, you're losing something if you're forced to move off that. Yeah. And I guess there's the computer / mobile alignment too, right? If they're running with an iPhone and then at work they get put on that, and there's just this, I don't know, introduced complexity potentially.
Introduce complexity, absolutely. I think Apple do that really well in that user experience that we expect at home and that we want at work as well. We shouldn't be able to have, first class technology and kind of live in the Stone Age at work as well. I kind of think about it of my personal experience, and yes, I am a little bit biased, but I've been in a position where I didn't necessarily have the choice of what device I wanted to use. And going back to a PC, even though with modern cloud technology, all my content, all my data is there, just being able to familiarize myself with just the basics, just really silly things like where's my start bar, where are my applications, where are my settings, have I customized my cursor settings or whatever it might be. So just little tiny things like that just really play a big part to the individual.
Yeah, right. So I guess when you're out there and your job is pretty much to get companies happy to introduce Macs into their environment, what are the key pushbacks? Is it, I don't know how to secure that, I don't know how to essentially manage that, or what else?
All of the above.
Okay,
I'm going to throw one in there though.
Yep.
Cost.
Right. Okay.
Absolutely cost.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've encountered that here. We're vendor agnostic, but there's definitely that. Well, apples for apples as best you can. What's the comparison? So run through that for me. What's the difference typically in a device cost? How do you even do an apples for apples comparison? Yeah. How do you address that?
I think the first thing, there's so many misconceptions. And, again, 5 years, as recent as 5 years ago, if you look at the sticker price, Macs do have that association of being a premium product with a premium price tag. And if we look at the cost of the sticker price of a Mac to a comparable PC, A couple of years ago, yeah, the price of a Mac is going to be higher than a PC. We're starting to see that shift though, right?
Okay.
So, not so long ago, about 3 years ago, Apple made the decision to move away from Intel chips to their own Apple Silicon. They introduced the M1 chip about 3 years ago,
Okay.
and you're starting to see costs decline, the initial sticker price, that is. So, the upfront cost is getting better. I think as we kind of see these next generation devices from other vendors, you're starting to see costs increase there as well. So today alone, if that makes sense, today
Mm.
you're starting to see that the actual sticker price of a Mac to a comparable PC, apples to apples, pardon the pun. Beyond that, you start to then want to consider the life cycle of the device as well. And Apple devices, whether it's Mac, an iPhone, an iPad, actually hold a greater residual value at the end of a life cycle, whether that's 2, 3, or 4 years. So a lot of organizations are starting to reap the benefits of that residual value at the end of whatever that life cycle process is that they
Yeah,
call it.
sure.
So
I feel like I can imagine SMBs, like quite small organizations, would look to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? That they would look to realize that residual value. I got there. Good. But I imagine for bigger organizations, there's probably just not going to be someone who owns that. So it probably gets more about the total cost and what are the offsets between device differential. So, for example, how would you measure the improved productivity potentially, or the improved customer outcomes, or the improved staff acquisition and retention based on giving them the devices that drive that employee experience? So, have you got any advice? Is the question I'm getting to? Quite a long walk there, but what are the real world cost offsets? Like the device might cost $1,000 extra, but when it comes to staff acquisition, retention, how fast they're onboarded, how do you sort of convey that to a decision maker in a business?
yeah, and I think moving away from the device costs, getting organizations to start to realize the impact it has across other business units. So, for example, getting HR stakeholders involved in that conversation. What role does technology have in terms of staff attraction? Attracting quality talent. Like, I think a lot of people entering the workforce are kind of considering, hey, what device am I going to use? And I know not so long ago, I don't know if I want to say that, I know when I was looking for a job, kind of just looking at the company culture, right? And seeing what devices are on people's desks. And if I see a mixed bag of devices, knowing that I could have the choice of choosing a Mac there as well. In addition to that, there's some onboarding benefits as well when you start to use tools like Apple Business Manager and a bunch of services that Apple provide for free, by the way. And then combining that with tools like Jamf and Intune from a mobile device management perspective, creating a really seamless onboarding experience. Gone are the days, or we do want to get to a point where getting an employee up and running on their first day should take minutes, not hours, not days, not weeks. So being able to automate that with the right technology stack and the savings that has there, and ultimately impact it has on productivity, but also from a retention perspective, going back to that stat, what was it? 42% of people Accenture had surveyed would actually leave that organization due to substandard technology, right? So all of that has a part to play.
Okay. So we've mentioned Jamf about a million times now,
We
so we
have,
should
yeah.
actually talk about it. So let's do some education to the people watching who don't already know. Intune, Jamf, management, security, what part do they play? How's it all work?
Massive part. So you're here in the industry, MDM, mobile device management, so many other different acronyms for it as well, MAM, EDM, all these other bits and pieces as well. Essentially, the ability to configure devices, set them up, provision them, manage them, support them as well. So some of the players out there, Jamf, we talk about that a lot because they're a best of breed tool for Apple devices. They manage Apple devices exclusively and have done that for the last 20 something years. But then another serious contender there as well is Intune. I think that's just because of Microsoft's presence in the enterprise space or in any organization. And the fact that a lot of organizations have Intune licensing in some way, shape, or form. So,
Okay, so when it comes to centrally managing and securing a hybrid environment, what part does Jamf and Intune play, and how do they essentially interact to create those security outcomes, particularly with reference to a company that's currently using, say, all PCs, has Essential 8 alignment requirements. What is actually taking on a hybrid IT environment look like from that perspective?
yeah, no, great question. I think, look, gone are the days where they're exclusive, right? It's not one or the other. I think the organizations who do this properly get the best of both worlds. And let's be real, Microsoft's been around for a very, very long time. A lot of organizations will have some sort of Microsoft investment or presence from a licensing perspective, and that's driving a lot of compliance. Have we mentioned Essential 8 already?
I did, but you haven't.
I haven't. A lot of organizations are looking at, Essential 8, especially in the Australian landscape as well. Other security benchmarks like CIS, Center of Internet Security benchmarks as well. So, and a lot of that stuff that Microsoft's doing behind the scenes is driving and enforcing a lot of those policies and that hardening posture as well. What Intune does, but doesn't do it as well as Jamf, is executing that in the Mac environment. So organizations who are doing this really well take advantage of those behind the scenes integrations. Things like conditional access, identity integration, especially in that cloud sort of ecosystem as well. So have Microsoft, have Intune define validate a lot of that security posture. But if a Mac is trying to access corporate resources and for whatever reason it's not compliant, it's got certain software, it doesn't have a certain configuration policy, even some cool stuff of, it's potentially on a bad network, or, it was in Australia 5 minutes ago and now it's seen to be in Russia. Let Microsoft validate that and tell Jamf, hey, or let Intune validate that and tell Jamf, hey, we need to remediate that. And Jamf then can handle the remediation perspective in a really seamless way. So it's not scaring or impacting the end user or making them unproductive. So again, they can access those resources and do their work.
So what I'm hearing is that essentially Intune can do a lot of introductory or sort of base level stuff for a hybrid environment, but it's really Jamf is going to be doing the heavy lifting for a company that has any security alignment, framework alignment they need to adhere to, or just want to be super best practice, basically.
Spot on.
Okay, cool. Nailed it. All right, sweet. Assuming that I am a IT decision maker in a company of 50 to 200 people who are all PCs at the moment, we're using Intune, and we've decided that it's important to us that we introduce a hybrid IT strategy environment. What are we going to need to change?
A great question. I think, look, most organizations, I'll start off with Microsoft. We've got Intune, fantastic baseline. It will get the devices out there. It will get them access to the right applications and the right settings, right? When we start to look at how do we go to that next level, how do we integrate that with a seamless onboarding experience? How do we secure that? Something that's of a serious consideration is a tool like Jamf Pro from an MDM perspective. In addition to that, they've got some identity integrations as well. So now we start to introduce things like Jamf Connect that could tie in, assuming you're a Microsoft environment, with your Azure or your Entra identification credentials, also leveraging tools like Okta as well. And I think one of the biggest benefits for IT teams, for end user, is that concept of that single sign-on experience, being able to have the one username and password for your device or your corporate applications. And I think that's a beautiful thing, especially when we start talking. Maybe I've done tech for too long that sort of stuff excites me, right?
Maybe.
I mean, we've all been there, right? So, some companies will say, hey, change your password every 90 days. Some might say every 30 days, having to recycle those passwords and then sign into every application on every device. But being able to maintain that single sign-on experience, irregardless of what sort of technology stack you have or what sort of devices you use, is such a small impact to the user experience, but it impacts productivity tenfold.
So to be clear, we're saying you've got Intune, you've got all these PCs. You want to introduce Apple devices, Macs for your employees. You are going to potentially need to do nothing different at all if you want to just stick with Intune. But if you want to step up your security posture or ensure that the PCs that were potentially aligned with some sort of Essential 8 maturity level, to have the Macs attain the same alignment, you will then need to potentially introduce Jamf. And you'll have single sign-on across both. If you are using single sign-on across all devices will be, if you're using Intune, you can achieve that.
To really go to that level of sophistication, tools like Jamf Pro, Jamf Connect, and then tying that back in with your Microsoft identity. Other organizations might be using things like Okta, for example. Jamf then starts to, I guess it's called the power of Jamf and leveraging third-party tools, third-party services. So.
Okay, cool. All right, definitely don't want to make this too much for Jamf sales presentation, so I'll stop specifically talking about that.
Yeah,
but I guess the key thing is, well, so the thing for me is, okay, so I'm a IT decision maker in a company of 50 to 200 staff, say. I am currently using PCs universally. I've got Intune in play. Then I decide, you know what? I'm going to bring in Max. I'm going to make that happen. So what do I need to do differently to make that happen? Discuss.
Look, I don't think it's a one size fits all sort of approach, right? It's not going to work, right? Different organizations are going to have different requirements.
It's a classic. It depends.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So keeping it simple. So it depends, right? Yeah. So, organization ABC might just need, not the ABC, but this organization might say, you know what, we just need, to encrypt our devices and make sure, there aren't any bad applications on there. Some organizations are going to have different security frameworks. And I think, that's really a conversation. How do we find the right solution for your requirements?
Yeah. So. Okay. And I think that's where the consultative approach to sales comes in. If you're working with a good MSP, let's just say, I don't know, First Focus, you'll be saying, I want to do that. Cool. Your business aspires to align with or needs to align with, Essential 8 ML2. For that to happen, you will have to also introduce Jamf, which is this, management tool, centralized management tool for Apple devices. And that's because of your need to have XYZ feature enabled, whatever, right? So yeah, I get that it's going to be a horses for courses approach. In some cases, Intune with a hybrid environment, no issue. Others, you're going to need to introduce some new things. So really, when it comes to understanding the total cost of ownership, which this whole thing kind of comes back to, it's probably, again, a bit of consultation with your managed service provider, or if you've got IT in-house, to understand the outcomes. Okay. That sort of gets us there. What else do we want to talk about when it comes to the employee experience and customer experience outcomes from a hybrid strategy? I suppose the only thing I'd say is that the happier and more productive your employees are, that has a direct impact on customer experience, right? If you're dealing with people who are feeling that they're unable to get a job done, they're not set up for failure because they don't simply understand the tools they've got, that is going to flow on to customer experience. So there's probably I would say it's less tangible. I don't know how you would measure this back, but employee experience drives customer experience, which drives commercial outcomes. So have you got a really smart way when you're talking to people in the industry? Do you have a good way of framing that, or is that something you're also struggling with as much as I am?
Yeah.
That.
You kind of alluded to it,
Yeah.
Happy employees, happy customers, good outcomes, right? There's some cool organizations in Australia that are doing some cool things with Apple devices. Real Estate Australia, for example, Offer Choice, a lot of developers, a lot of finance people, all sorts of people using Macs as well. And they're creating some great applications out there as well. We think about retail as well. R.M. Williams, make good shoes, no plug. They're using Apple devices as well. And you walk into one of their stores and it's such a beautiful experience.
Exclusively Apple, or is that just Apple in the storefronts and then, a lot of PC or whatever? Have they gone hybrid as well?
That's a good question. It's a good question. So
there you go. Yeah, it's interesting in the case of R.M. Williams, if they've chosen to drive customer experience through deploying an Apple environment in the stores, but have realized that at the admin back office side, either it's hybrid or PC, it really is. That's a far more tangible way, depending on your industry segment or vertical, as to how you can actually, again, align device choices to customer expectations or customer comfort. So yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that as an actual just direct impact rather than through the employee experience feeding out. Yeah. Anyway. All right, cool. Just while we're here, since we've got you, because I think we've talked that one through pretty effectively. Anything interesting happening in the Apple world that you think would make a good little tidbit for people watching?
Oh, look, there's always exciting things happening in the Apple space. I think the big thing that's got a lot of excitement in tech all around the world is the launch of Vision Pro. If you haven't done a Vision Pro demo,
does it have a commercial application yet, or is it much more personal?
Look, it's still been defined, I guess. There are commercial organizations that are doing some cool stuff there. Porsche, Jigsaw, it's still being defined. It's still early days. So,
is that do you personally get the spatial, like the peripheral illness, whatever they call it, where the peripheral's blocked and about 30-40% of people feel really sick when they can't?
Look, when I demoed it, when I walked out, it's like, oh, I've got a bit of a headache. So, but it's tiny.
All right, so I think we've probably done the hybrid IT strategy conversation to its logical end for today. But while I've got you here, it's always good to check in on, I guess, new features, and particularly, I mean, we can't have an episode without talking about AI, right? So what do we need to know about movement in the AI world when it comes to Apple?
Yeah, look, it's coming. So WWDC back in June, Apple announced AI, Apple Intelligence, Apple's pun on AI.
Yeah,
so yes, AI, Apple Intelligence coming soon. And I think absolutely game changing. We know for a fact that tools like Copilot work perfectly on Mac, iPhone, iPad. I guess Apple's take and the fact that it's secure, everything's on device. And if it needs to push anything up to the cloud, for example, it's transparent. It will tell the end user that information is going to the cloud. There's nothing on there that identifies users, and it protects their data as well. That's going to be absolutely game changing.
Okay. Okay, so having really discussed the hybrid IT strategy to its logical end, let's just quickly check in on Apple news generally while we've got you here. In the AI space, we can't not mention AI. We're contractually obliged to every episode. So what's happening there following the conference earlier in the year?
Yeah, so Worldwide Developers Conference back in June, Apple announced Apple Intelligence, another form of AI. So that is coming later on in the year, but it's going to completely change the way both you use AI technology, both at home and at work. Unfortunately, not available to test just yet, but there is a bucket load of information online, white papers. From a security perspective, absolutely game changing. I feel like I've said that a few times already.
Love the
Completely different to what some of the other vendors are doing there as well. Everything from a privacy perspective, everything's on device. And when it does need to go back up to the cloud, it is sending that information anonymously.
Well pronounced.
Anonymously. So it just kind of falls into. It takes into account Apple's stance on privacy as well, and user information. So.
Right. Yeah, there's a bit of that. I've had some other conversations with other vendors doing the AI thing recently where even if the compute is, if the storage is onshore but the compute is offshore, there's issues there too. It's quite a complex space, but probably out of scope for today, because I don't know any more than what I literally just said. So past that, we're out of words. All right, cool. I think we'll wrap it up there. Ed, Mac Specialist from Synnex, thank you very much for coming on. If you want to hit up Ed, you know where to find him, because I always just tell you to go look at LinkedIn. So do that, I guess. And as always, if you've got any ideas for content that you would like to see, let us know. However, we will be doing another episode on how to also drive that EXCX piece next episode. So stay tuned for more info on that one.